When it comes to history and archaeology, not all evidence holds equal value. For example, what would it take to demonstrably prove that the Egyptian Pharaoh Ramses II was indeed a real person? If we have just one written account about his life written hundreds of years after he died, even if it's a full book, that's not the best evidence. After all, we have stories about Hercules, Odysseus, Robin Hood, Gilgamesh, King Arthur, and many others who may or may not have even been real people. A bit better than that are contemporary accounts, written during the life of the person in question, either by them or by a scribe. First-hand contemporary accounts are obviously more reliable than contemporary second-hand accounts, and it gets increasingly worse the further down the game of telephone you go. It helps if the stories are based in real locations, but again, that's still not quite good enough. After all, while Troy and Athens were in fact real places, the Iliad and the Odyssey are mythical stories, and the existence of London doesn't prove the events of Harry Potter. Statues, coins, pottery, and other artifacts dating to the time of the person in question with names and faces of that person on them, like coins featuring Caesar, are pretty good.
How much were you looking to get out of it? I need about $350.
But still not necessarily conclusive. For example, we have ancient Greek pots featuring the myth of Theseus and the Minotaur, which is obviously myth. Now, all of these pieces of evidence can add up to make a more compelling case for the historicity of a character or event. But the gold standard, if we want to demonstrably prove the existence of someone, is to find the body. That's not always possible. But in the case of Ramses II, we don't just have a tomb or a skeleton, we have an entire necropolis telling the tales of the victories of his life, marked with his name or cartouche, containing his preserved, mummified corpse, buried in the style of the pharaohs, dating to the time of his death, and we can even sequence his DNA and the DNA of his ancestors and descendants' preserved corpses to see if they match. On top of that, there are contemporary mentions of him located in foreign countries. Now, this still doesn't mean that all of the accounts of Ramses II's great military campaigns are accurate, and people have a tendency to brag and stories become embellished into legends over time.
When he sets up his record of the Battle of Kadesh, Ramses proves that he's the greatest spin doctor of the ancient world.
The carvings tell the story not of an inconclusive truce, but a clear-cut victory.
But there's a reason that no respectable historian or Egyptologist doubts the existence of Ramses II. Let's compare that to the story of Joshua in the Bible. Arguably one of the most important characters in Old Testament history, leading the Israelites into the Promised Land. So just how good is the evidence for Joshua? Well, we don't have a mummy, or a skeleton, or even a tomb. Oh, and don't be thrown when someone shows you something like this and says, look, it's Joshua's tomb. There are many sites like this proposed as Joshua's tomb hundreds, sometimes thousands of years after his death, including locations in Turkey, Israel, the West Bank, Iran, Iraq, Jordan, and Lebanon, all claiming to be Joshua's tomb. Truth is, no one knows where he was buried if he lived at all. There are no contemporary artifacts mentioning Joshua, foreign or Israeli, and the only contemporary artifact mentioning Israel itself at all is the Merneptah stele constructed in Egypt around 1209 BCE. It is currently the oldest archaeological mention of Israel, period, and records how Israel was utterly laid to waste. As I mentioned in my first Nothing Fails Like Bible History video, we know that during this time period, the land of Canaan was under Egyptian control. We know this because of remnants of Egyptian mines and fortresses in modern-day Israel that date to this time period, as well as diplomatic correspondences from this time period and numerous contemporary written records of battle victories, in addition to the over 680 archaeological objects that you can see for yourself currently on display at the Pharaoh and Canaan exhibit at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem. So if the biblical timeline was true, this would directly coincide with the time period that Joshua was allegedly growing a massive Israelite army that was pillaging and conquering the land of Canaan. Wait, so the only evidence that we have from this time period that the people of Israel even existed completely contradicts the biblical narrative? So there's no body of Joshua, no tomb, no contemporary artifacts backing up this story, and what we know about the region from archaeological evidence runs contrary to the biblical narrative. Do we at least have a first-hand account written by Joshua? No. Do we have any eyewitness accounts who saw the events firsthand? No. What about the Bible itself and the book of Joshua? Well, we don't know who the author of the book of Joshua was, but they clearly indicate that it's not a first-hand account. The anonymous author never says, this is what I witnessed or this is what I saw or did. Instead, they recount stories secondhand, saying things like, these events took place as it was written in the book of Jashar. The book of Jashar? We know absolutely nothing about the book of Jashar. We don't know who wrote it. We don't know when it was written. If it was even a first-hand account, we don't even have a copy of it. So we have at best a second, if not third or fourth hand account citing a source no longer in existence, written years, possibly centuries after the fact. Well, the author even tells how Joshua slaughtered the Amorite kings, threw their bodies in caves, and placed large rocks at the entrance, noting that at the mouth of the cave they placed large rocks, which are there to this day. To this day, implying that a great deal of time has passed since the story being retold. Even most biblical Christian scholars agree that this story was not written by Joshua or even by a first-hand witness, but was most likely written down sometime around the reign of King Josiah, centuries after the fact. Centuries after the fact. Sure, the story of Joshua mentions real locations that actually existed, but in terms of historicity, that's about all it has going for it. But remember, the story of King Arthur also takes place in a real location, England. But whether or not King Arthur was or was not a real person doesn't make the magical story of the sword and the stone any less of an embellishment. In the same way, the Israelites may or may not have once had a leader named Joshua. The evidence for his existence is extremely shoddy, but even if the legends are based on a real person, that doesn't make them true. When Christians say there's so much evidence for the stories in the Bible, like the story of Joshua, I think that what they may be referring to are things like this: a sculpture made almost 3,000 years after the fact. Or this, a painting made almost 2,800 years after the fact. Yes, there's a lot of people who talk about this story, but no matter how many songs, books, or poems are written, movies filmed, paintings painted, or statues carved hundreds or even thousands of years later, based on second or third hand translated accounts passed down through the generations, the fact remains the same. This is not evidence. It is a perpetuation of mythology. It blows my mind to see Bible-believing Christians doubt things like Sandy Hook or the moon landing, or who think that the earth is flat, here in the information age with real-time live streaming of events. And yet, without batting an eye, they will swallow whole a 3,000-year-old story with no corroborating evidence, written centuries after it allegedly happened by anonymous authors based on at least second, third, or fourth, or even fifth-hand accounts. They'll wash it down with a hymn and call it a Sunday. And mind you, these aren't just stories about battles or everyday phenomenon. The book of Joshua is about utterly preposterous pseudoscientific legends, magically parting the Jordan River, toppling the walls of Jericho by yelling at them, and worst of all, making the sun stand still in the sky, which I'm gonna have to cover in my next video. But you gotta face it, Christians, you got a pretty low standard of evidence when it comes to the historicity of your Bible. And this is yet another example of how nothing fails like Bible history. Thank you so much to all my new and current patrons and PayPal donors for supporting this video. We just broke 100,000 subscribers! What the was that? We just broke 100,000 subscribers this month, guys, which is super exciting. I've been doing this full time for over 3 years, and I have really big plans for growing Holy Koolaid, including hiring a team, renting a studio, and having an advertising budget. So if you want to help me push back against the current religious insanity that is the evangelical movement and the current United States government, please go to patreon.com/holykoolaid for more information on how you can make an ongoing pledge. I also recently set up a Subscribestar account if you don't like Patreon. And if you want to make a one-time donation on PayPal, you can do that too. My videos will always be free to watch, so whether you make a donation or not, if you like and share this video, it will reach more people. Thank you as always. Y'all are amazing. And until next time, dare to be curious, but don't drink the Kool-Aid.